Good evening, students. Welcome to the Analyst. I hope you all are doing good and I hope your preparation is going fine. This is 10th of September 2023 and we are here to discuss important articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express. Now, the table of contents for today. The first topic is Day 1 of G20 Summit and what are the key takeaways related to it. Second topic is the New Delhi Declaration. The third important topic is India, Middle East, Europe Mega Economic Corridor, which is a very important topic. The fourth topic is Tracks of G20. And the last topic is related to your Global Biofuels Alliance. So all the topics which we are taking up today are highly important for your UPSC Civil Services examination. Now the handout of the session is there in the description box. You can use the handout to streamline your current affairs preparation. So let's start with the first topic. First of all, why it is important? Because in order to understand your global geopolitics and in order to understand the various global groupings involving India and India's interest, it is important for us to know what happened at the first day of the G20 Summit, which is why we will be covering it in depth. So the context is that recently, yesterday only, the Day 1 of G20 Summit has concluded. So we'll be studying what is there in the Day 1 of the G20 Summit. See, first thing is that the Konark Wheel served as the backdrop of the welcome handshake where our Prime Minister welcomed the other dignitaries to the G20 Summit. So the Konark Wheel, as you can see here in the image below, the Konark Wheel was taken from the Konark Sun Temple of Odisha's Puri, and it served as the backdrop of the welcome handshake between the Prime Minister of our country, that is Prime Minister Modi, and other countries' dignitaries and other countries' leaders. Second is that Bharat has replaced the term India on the name card. So the name card which was placed in front of our Honorable Prime Minister, Bharat was the term which was used. And it replaced the term which was earlier used, that is India. Also, a very landmark declaration happened, which you call as New Delhi's Leadership Declaration. So it got adopted. Another thing was that India, Middle East, Europe Mega Economic Corridor was initiated and MOUs was signed related to it. African Union became a part, that is a permanent member of your G20. That is also a very important landmark event which happened. India introduced the Global Biofuel Alliance. So alliance to promote biofuel at a global level, that was also introduced by India. So that is also a very landmark and important initiative. Also, this G20 satellite mission for environment and climate observation has been proposed by India. And our Prime Minister, that is Prime Minister Modi, held bilateral talks, that is country-to-country talks, with the leaders of Japan, with the leaders of Italy, and with that of United Kingdom, right? So, on the sidewalks of G20 Summit, several bilateral talks were also held during the first day. Also, the current and the next three presidencies, that is your India, which is the current president, then the next three presidents, that is Brazil, South Africa, and United States of America, they all together reaffirmed their commitment to G20. That is also one thing which happened. And the day concluded with our Honorable President Draupadi Murmu hosting a dinner for the G20 leaders and delegate at Bharat Mandapam. So this is the Day 1 of G20 Summit and the key takeaways. That is what all happened in the first day of your G20 Summit. Now, several important landmark events which happened, we'll be taking up one by one these events. So let's go to the first thing, that is New Delhi Declaration. It's the second topic of today, New Delhi's declaration, which was signed in this G20 Summit of the day first. Why it is important for your GS2 perspective? Again, bilateral, regional and global groupings have been mentioned and G20 is a very important global grouping. So what is this New Delhi Declaration, right? That is the first question which should strike to our mind. See, it's a consensus-oriented declaration which was signed by all the members of G20, reaffirming the commitment and the shared values of all the leaders of the G20. and all the countries of the G20. So it's a consensus-based declaration which also marks the democratization of diplomacy in the entire world. Why? Because it is consensus oriented. That is, all the countries in G20 plus the European Union, it agreed to the declaration, the New Delhi Declaration. Now, what all topics or subjects were talked about in this New Delhi Declaration? We'll study each topic in detail. First, a very important thing was that this declaration talked about Russia-Ukraine war. Now, it is very difficult to have consensus of all the countries on what was written related to Russia-Ukraine war. But still, India managed to get the consensus of all the members. Okay, so first thing is what is written in this Russia-Ukraine war matter. First thing is that all the states must act in a manner which is consistent to the UN Charter. So the importance of UN Charter is highlighted in this declaration. Also, one more thing is that all the member states must refrain from threat or force to seek a territorial acquisition. So, against the territorial acquisition, this declaration has been made. And to ensure territorial integrity and sovereignty of the countries. That is a message which this declaration is giving. Also, this declaration is reiterating the peaceful resolution, the requirement of peaceful resolution of the conflicts between Russia and Ukraine. And the need for diplomacy and dialogue is also highlighted. There is also a thing which is written that today's era must not be an era of war, which our Prime Minister also highlighted and has remarked previously as well, that this era, this 21st century, is not the century of war. And this was again reiterated in this New Delhi Declaration. Plus, there were divergent views, different views and assessments of the situation, but still we were able to achieve a broad consensus. Right. On food energy security also, several consensus was there. For example, the calls were there on Russia and Ukraine to ensure immediate and unimpeded deliveries of grains, foodstuffs and fertilizers from Russia and Ukraine. That is also one more thing. Another thing is that it emphasized on a sustainable food and energy security and the calls of cessation of military destruction in these infrastructures. Also, the potential for high level of volatility in food and energy market, it remains, and that is what this declaration highlighted as well. On economic and financial matters also, this declaration talked about. First is that all the countries, all the members need to protect the vulnerable and equitable growth in the entire world. Also, they need to ensure that macroeconomic and financial stability is enhanced in the entire world. Also, they reaffirmed one exchange rate commitment which was made by the G20 finance ministers and the central bank governors in April of 2021. So it also got reaffirmed. Also, they ensured the Financial Stability Board's high-level recommendations to regulate, supervise and oversight the crypto assets. That is, the assets which are using the technology of cryptography. Also, one more thing is that the finance ministers and central bank governors, they will continue to have the discussion and take forward the discussion on cryptocurrency roadmap as well. So the talks related to cryptocurrency roadmap were also there in this New Delhi Declaration. Also, to ensure a level playing field and competition by discouraging protectionism and market distorting practices. So a consensus has been achieved among all the members that we need to stop the protectionist activities, the protectionist stance which many countries are going for. And also we need to ensure that the market distorting practices, they are done away with. Also on global debt vulnerabilities also, there is a reiteration that we need to ensure debt remains sustainable in the entire world. And also there is a call for swift conclusion of the debt treatment for Ethiopia as well. Right? On health related things, all the countries, they share the common value, that is, they remain committed to strengthening the global healthcare infrastructure. That is the commitment of all the countries. And to enhance the resilience of healthcare systems and to support the climate resilient and low carbon health systems in the entire world. Now, specifically on climate change, they have talked on length and they have had consensus on length. First thing is that there is a urgent need to accelerate the efforts which are ongoing. The current efforts which are there in order to combat the climate change, they are not sufficient. And there is a need to accelerate on those efforts. Also, there is a need to work towards facilitating low-cost financing for the developing countries. So the developing countries should achieve or should receive a low-cost finance related to carbon restructuring. Also, the consensus is around to pursue and encourage efforts to triple the renewable energy capacity globally, right, till 2030. And also the commitment to ensure sustainable finance in the entire world, so that the finance related to climate is sustainable. It is not that the finance is there in the first day, in the first year, but it dries up till the 10th year. Okay, so the issues related to your carbon pricing or the non-pricing mechanisms and incentives to ensure your carbon neutrality and net zero emissions, all these issues were also talked about in this declaration. Also to recognize increased global investments in climate security, and 5.8 to 5.9 trillion in pre-2030 period is required for the developing countries. That has been reiterated, in particular to implement the emissions target which they have set for themselves. Also, there is a call to set ambitious, transparent and trackable new collective quantified goal of climate finance. You have to understand this in detail. So, collectivized goal related to climate finance in 2024. And the floor which they have decided, amount which they have decided is your $100 billion a year. So this is very important related to climate change. This is a very important takeaway from the New Delhi Declaration. And this we have already discussed, that it is a consensus-based declaration based on the principle of democratization of diplomacy in the entire world. Now coming to the third topic of today, it is related to the economic corridor between India, the Middle East and the Europe. Now why it is important? For your GS paper 3, Indian economy portion, this corridor becomes very, very important. Plus your GS paper 2 also, related to your international relations, this topic becomes important. Now, why this topic is important? First of all, our Prime Minister has announced the launch of India, Middle East, Europe Mega Economic Corridor on the sidelines of this G20 Summit. So, first thing for us to understand is that what this economic corridor entails, or what this economic corridor is all about. See, first thing is that it is a rail and a shipping corridor, which will involve your railways, which will involve your shipping industry, that is your ports. So it's a rail and shipping corridor which will connect India with the Middle East and the Europe. And the main aim of the main objective is to counter the Belt and Road Initiative of China, right? That is why the evolution of this economic corridor is there. Now it will include several countries, for example, your India, UAE, Saudi Arabia, European Union, France, Italy, Germany and United States of America. Now this economic corridor or mega economic corridor is part of the Partnership for Global Infrastructure Investment, that is PGII, which is again a part of your G7. And the main aim of this PGII is to fund the infrastructural projects in developing countries. Now, under this initiative, this mega economic corridor is being launched. I hope it is very clear to all of you. Now, this is the image which you can see in order to understand how this economic corridor will link Mumbai to the Middle East and all the way to the European countries. Right? Now, why it is important? First of all, it will bridge the ports across the two continents. Also, it will make easier to trade. So, trade becomes easier. Then exporting clean energy, that is also very important because again, we are focusing on ensuring equitable and sustainable climate efforts, right? So exporting clean energy, expanding the access to reliable clean electricity. That is also a major boost which will happen once this economic corridor starts to function. Also, it will help us to lay cables and connect the communities through secure internet connections as well. So laying down the cables, it also becomes easier because of this economic corridor, and it will unlock the sustainable and inclusive economic growth of the region in general, of European region, of your Middle Eastern region, and also your India. So it will help in all these factors. Now, what all things will be there under this economic corridor? First, a rail link would be there. Then electricity cables in order to ensure smooth flow of electricity. A hydrogen pipeline is also being planned, and a high-speed data cable to ensure better internet connectivity throughout the region. That is there under your India, Middle East, Europe mega economic corridor. I hope it is very, very clear to all of you. Now, coming to the fourth topic of today, it is related to the tracks in G20. That what all tracks are there in your G20. Tracks means the working groups, the working mechanisms under your G20. Why it is important? For your GS paper 3, Indian economy, it is important because there is a track called finance track under this G20. So finance track is important for your Indian economy. Then for your general studies paper 2, obviously G20 as an organization in itself is very important, or a grouping in itself is very important. So the tracks of G20. The ongoing G20 Summit is operating in 3 tracks broadly under the aegis of these 3 tracks. Now what are these G20 tracks? First track is your finance track. Second one is the Sherpa track, and third one is your engagement groups. Now let us study all these tracks in detail. Tracks basically means your working mechanisms, right? The working authorities. So first working mechanism is your finance track. Now who heads this finance track? It's composed of whom? It's composed of your finance ministers of all the members of G20 plus central bank governors of all the members of the G20. So it's composed of finance ministers and the central bank governors. Now there are 2 meetings. Basically it meets for 4 times a year. But amongst those 4 meetings, there are 2 meetings which happens in the sidelines of the World Bank and IMF meetings. So this finance track consists of your finance ministers, central bank governors, and it usually meets 4 times a year. Now amongst those 4 times, 2 of the times they meet on the sidelines of World Bank and IMF meeting. That is, they meet amongst or collaborate with the meetings of your World Bank and International Monetary Fund. Now, the main area of focus of this finance track is to ensure fiscal and monetary policy issue resolution, right? So, any issue related to your fiscal policy, that is policy, the economic policy of the government, or the monetary policy, that is the economic policy of the central bank of a country. So issues related to that is being discussed in this finance track. Also, the issues related to your global economy. For example, if a financial crisis is going on or a global slowdown is there, all the issues are discussed in this finance track. Now, issues related to your infrastructure as well. Energy infrastructure, railway infrastructure, airport infrastructure, all those important infrastructure things or issues are discussed in this track. Then financial regulation, that is how to regulate the flow of finance in the entire world, that is also being discussed in this finance track. In the issues are related to financial inclusion, that is issues are related to poverty as well, inequality as well, income inequality also, and the broader issue of financial inclusion. That is, how do you include more and more people into the financial net of the country? International financial architecture. That is how finance is flowing from one country to another country, how the issue of money laundering is impacting it, how that finance is being used to promote illegal activities and the ways and mechanisms to curb them. So all those issues are being discussed in this finance track, and also various issues related to international taxation as well. That is, how much the tax should be levied by one country over a multinational corporation, right? So things or minimum alternative tax, all the issues related to that are being discussed in your finance track. Now it is composed of various working groups which are working under this finance track. They are, for example, the Framework Working Group, International Financial Architecture Working Group. So all these working groups are there. They work under the finance track, and several important experts, industry related experts and economic experts are the part of these working groups. Now second is the Sherpa track. Now first of all, you understand what is this term Sherpa. Now, Sherpa is a metaphor which is basically used, it's a term, kind of a metaphor used in your mountaineering domain. That is, in mountaineering domain, this term Sherpa is used a lot. And the term Sherpa relates to a person who is supposed to do the heavy lifting and assist the mountaineer. That is, to lift the equipments of the mountaineer and do all the hard task which needs to be done in order to assist the mountaineer. So these Sherpas are assisting whom? They are assisting the heads of the states or heads of the governments. So on the backside, the Sherpa of a country in G20 is the person who is responsible for all day-to-day activities, day-to-day transactions, day-to-day business being done in the G20. Right? So that's related to Sherpa. Now it was established in the year 2008. Why? Because before 2008, this G20 basically consisted of finance ministers and the central bank governors only. But in 2008, from that, the Sherpa track also started. And they are basically the representatives of heads of state. So they represent the head of the state and they talk on behalf of the head of the state. Now, what are the main areas of focus of the Sherpa track? See, the first area is your socio-economic issues. Socio-economic issues like your agriculture, anti-corruption, climate-related issues, digital economy-related issues, education-related issues, employment, energy, environment security, healthcare, tourism, trade and investment. So very broad set of issues are being discussed in this Sherpa track as well. I hope this is also very clear. Now there is a third group or third track which goes on, and it is a kind of unofficial track. So it's not official. The G20 is having two official tracks. One is your finance track, one is your Sherpa track. The third one is the unofficial one. And it comprises of the engagement groups or the civil groups which are not a part of the government. And their main role is to draft recommendations and help in the policy making process of the G20 and the respective governments. So their main aim is to draft various recommendations in order to assist the policy making process. Right? And various kind of this engagement groups are there. The most prominent among them is the B20, that is Business 20. Then there is Civil 20 as well. Then Labor 20, Parliament 20, Science 20, Startup 20, Urban 20, Women 20, Youth 20. All those groups are there. They are a kind of informal groupings which have been made in order to give expert recommendations to the government and ensure that the policy making is done in an equitable, in an efficient and effective manner. That is the purpose of your engagement group. I hope this is again very, very clear to all of you. Now coming to the last topic of today, it is related to the Global Biofuels Alliance. Now, the Global Biofuel Alliance, it has been launched by our Prime Minister in the backdrop of your G20. And India has proposed the launching of this Global Biofuel Alliance. Now, why it is important? For your General Studies Paper 3, related to energy security, this topic becomes very, very important. Also related to environment conservation and environment degradation, and to ensure the promotion of your clean energy, this Global Biofuel Alliance becomes very, very important. Also related to your General Studies Paper 2, International Relations. Now coming to this alliance. First of all, what is the main purpose of this Global Biofuel Alliance? The main purpose is to ensure that in relation to biofuels, the global community, the global economy, and the entire gamut of countries, they come together to promote a clean source of energy, that is your biofuel. And the broader perspective or the broader purpose is to ensure the transition towards the sustainable usage of biofuels, and the broad and the large objective is to reduce the world's dependence on traditional fossil fuels. Now we know that these traditional fossil fuels, they cause a lot of pollution. So in order to ensure that the dependency of the world on this traditional fossil fuel is reduced, we have launched an alliance which you call as Global Biofuel Alliance. And again, the aim is to ensure worldwide development and deployment of your biofuels. Now we are talking about biofuels, but you need to understand one more thing, that what are these biofuels first of all, right? See, biofuels are your renewable energy sources, right? And they are the sources which ensures provision of renewable energy to us, and they are made from biomass. That is why the term biofuel. That is the fuel, the energy provided to us by the biomass. Now, what composes of your biomass? Your crop stubble, plant-related waste, or municipal solid waste. When they are converted into the form of energy through various processes, that energy is what you call as biomass energy. And the fuel which gets created is the biofuel. Now we are talking about a global alliance to promote these biofuels. That is to promote this clean source of energy, right? Which is a renewable energy as well. So what will be there in this alliance? A virtual kind of a marketplace will be there, which will assist industries, which will assist various countries and the ecosystem players and all the key stakeholders to map the demand and supply of biofuels in the entire world. Now, after mapping the demand and supply of biofuels, the need would be to connect the technology providers. That is, those who can provide the technology in order to ensure sustainable transition from your fossil fuel energy to this renewable source of energy. Right? And what are the various existing biofuel programs which are going on in our country? First is your PM G1 Yojana, then your SATAT, and then your Gobardhan scheme. So all these schemes are already existing in order to promote biofuel in our country. But now we have taken it to the level of the world, that is to an international level. Now all the countries in the world would be promoting this biofuel transition, right? Currently, 19 countries have agreed to join this, plus your 12 international organizations, which is a very good start to this initiative. And again, this happened in the backdrop of your G20. Now, if you see the infographic over here, you will be able to understand that India is looking to ramp up the biofuel production capacity, not indigenously, not just domestically, but also at the international level. Right? So India's ethanol production capacity, it is close to 12.4 billion liters. India's molasses-based distilleries capacity, it is close to 8.1 billion liters. India's grain-based distilleries capacity is 4.3 billion liters. Now, India, US and Brazil account for 85% of the global ethanol production as well. And India is having an initiative as well, which you call as E20. That is ethanol blending of 20% with the fuel. Now, India currently is having close to 1,350 outlets in the nationwide. Close to your year 2025, we'll be having 1,350 outlets that will be providing E20 fuel. That will be having the E20 fuel. Also, India contributes or will contribute by 2040 25% of the global energy demand. Since India's population is increasing And India is a young economy, so the energy demand of India is going to rise in future. And since it's a developing country, so in order to develop more, we would require energy sources. And the global energy demand of our country will rise close to 25% of the total global energy, which is again a very huge percentage, which is why we need to understand that a transition from the fossil fuel based energy to a more renewable source of energy and a cleaner source of energy is very much necessary for our country in order to combat the broader perspective or the broader issue of your climate change and global warming as well. I hope this issue or this topic is also very clear to all of you. So all the very best for your preparation, and I hope you enjoyed this lecture. Good luck.